Hello everybody, what's going on? This is Andrew, and today I'm going to be taking 10 of the top decks from Pioneer and talking about what you need to do to make them Explorer playable here on Arena. So, in case you missed it, Explorer is a new format that was announced recently. It's going to be an Arena format that is true to paper. That means it includes none of the digital-only cards, and it's going to mimic Pioneer as close as possible until Pioneer is completely playable on Arena, at which time Explorer will go away and Pioneer will just be the thing. So Explorer is like the stopgap format for Arena for those of us who want to play with our cards on Arena, but don't want to play Historic or Alchemy because we don't like those formats for whatever reason. For me, Explorer sounds perfect. I want to play a Pioneer adjacent format, and I had a lot of fun playing that midweek Magic event last week. So for me, this is a really exciting announcement. It might not matter for some, but I'm excited. So I'm going to talk about 10 of the top decks from Pioneer and talk about what needs to happen to make them Explorer ready. And I'm going to start here with a deck I just did a video with, actually. During that midweek Magic event, I played this blue-white control deck. All blue-white control loses between Pioneer and Explorer is Supreme Verdict. Otherwise, the whole deck's here. So you don't really need to do too much to make it playable. You need to figure out what other sweeper you want to play, be that Shatter the Sky, or Doomscar, or more copies of Farewell, whatever. Fill in the gaps as you see fit. Adjust your mana base if you need to. Otherwise, the deck's ready to go. There might be some sideboard cards that are missing also, but you have access to cards like Dream Trawler, Rest in Peace, things like that already. This deck is basically ready to go. Throw in some Shadow the Skies and some Doomscars and you are set. Moving on from blue-white, let's talk about perhaps the most powerful deck in Pioneer at the moment, and probably the most anticipated powerful deck in Explorer when the format launches next week, and that is Winota. This deck revolves around its key card, Winota Join Our Forces, which is a 4-mana 4/4 that says whenever a non-human creature you control attacks, you look at the top 6 cards of your deck, you may put a human creature card from among them onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. It gains indestructible until end of turn, and then the rest of the cards go on the bottom. So the way this deck works is it plays a bunch of mana dorks early on to help you get a Winota early, and then you attack with some creatures, and you get to put a Tovolar's Huntmaster, or a Kenrith the Returned King, or even an Elite Spellbinder onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking. If you put the Pack Leader into the battlefield, you get some Wolves. Kenrith has abilities that you can activate, like putting counters on stuff and giving your stuff trample. It's a really powerful, really quick combo deck, and it's not missing a lot from its Pioneer counterpart. The biggest miss is probably Elvish Mystic, so it plays 4 Atlanta Werewolves and 4 Elvish Mystic a lot of the time, but going up to Gilded Goose is fine. It kind of does what you need it to do anyways, and I think that that's going to be a pretty easy switch over for the deck. It's also missing Voice of Resurgence, but there are so many decent non-human 2-drops that this deck has access to. Cards like Adonto Vanguard or Scavenging Ooze. You can kind of test around and pick whatever you want to go here. I would start with 2 Vanguard, 2 Scavenging Ooze, but there's so many options at the 2-drop slot that missing out on Voice is not going to be that big of a miss. In the sideboard, there's a few cards that you need to swap out, like Fry instead of Rending Volley. But a lot of these sideboards are going to be pretty experimental anyways, because a certain combo deck that I'll get to later doesn't exist in Explorer and won't for a while. So the sideboards will need to change and be tuned a little bit, but I think this Winota deck is going to be pretty powerful, and you don't need to do a lot of work to make it work. Next, let's move on to Mono Red. The Mono Red deck in Pioneer, I did a video with this deck on Magic Online recently also. It's a pretty powerful deck. It has a lot of tools to get aggressive and to play the game longer, thanks to cards like Light Up the Stage, Bone Crusher Giant, and Chandra Dressed to Kill. But it is missing a few of its key 2-drops. It's missing Monastery Swift Spear, and it's missing Eidolon of the Great Revel, both of which are pretty key to the deck's success in Pioneer. That being said, I don't think this deck is just dead on arrival either, though. On the left side here, I put a bunch of options you have for other 1 and 2 drops that you could use to slot in. Cards like Beaumont Courier, Fanatical Firebrand, Fervent Champion, and Gitu Lava Runner have all shown success in mono red decks in the past. And then at the 2-drop slot, you've got things like Viashino Pyromancer, Unchained Berserker, Runaway Steamkin, Robber of the Rich, etc. You've got lots of options to choose from here, and your choices could impact other decisions you make in the deck. For example, if you went Gitu Lava Runner and Viashino Pyromancer, all of a sudden you've got kind of a Wizards sub-theme going, and so you could maybe afford to throw some Wizards Lightning into this deck, or you don't do that at all, and you do like Fervent Champion plus Rimrock Knight to get the Knights thing. You've got options. The sideboard, you have all your good sideboard cards. You've got Chandra Torch, you've got your Rampaging Ferocidons, your Lava Coils. Again, I don't know that you'll need the Roiling Vortex right away, because a combo deck, Lotus Field, doesn't exist. But the rest of the deck is here, right? You've got your Bone Crushers, you've got your Karizev, your Soulscar Mages. So mess around with whatever 1 or 2 drops you want. And I think this deck will still be just fine. Next, I'm going to talk about 2 versions of Rakdos. The first is the plain Rakdos Midrange deck that just relies on its card quality to kind of edge out opponents. It relies on efficient cards like Thoughtseize and Fatal Push and Bone Crusher Giant to help it pull ahead, and then its powerful 4-drops like Chandra, Angrath, and Sorin to close the gap. This deck is good. It's just a solid, disruptive, slightly aggressive deck in the format. And you've got access to most of your sideboard cards that you want also. You've got your Dresses, your Rave Enfeeblements, your Legion's Ends, your Goblinks, and your Kolaghan's Commands. What this deck is really missing is Kalidas, Trader of Geth. That card isn't here yet. So instead, you'd have to make do with other powerful 4-drop options, like Rekindling Phoenix or maybe Moonveil Regent, as powerful 4-drop cards that put on pressure but also give you some form of card advantage as the game goes along. The deck is also missing Dreadbore, which is a 2-mana destroy target creature or planeswalker card. I think you could probably fill in with Angrath's Rampage or more Bloodchief's Thirsts for now, and I don't think you'd lose that many percentage points there. But otherwise, you've got the rest of this deck. You've got your Planeswalkers, you've got your Bone Crusher Giants, and your Kroxa. I think you're good to go. I think you can mess around with the numbers on this deck, but I think this deck will be pretty powerful if you invest the time into learning exactly what cards you need to Thoughtseize, what you need to kill with Stomp, etc. The next version of Rakdos that I want to talk about is the Sacrifice variant. This deck still relies on Thoughtseize and Fatal Push as efficient pieces of interaction, but it only goes up to Mayhem Devil, and then it plays with synergies in Onicult Anvil, Experimental Synthesizer, Blood Tithe Harvester, and Voldaren Epicure a little bit more. This deck is super efficient, super powerful, and is missing nothing in this format. You can take a Pioneer version of this list, copy paste it over. You might need to adjust 1 or 2 sideboard cards, but then you can just go nuts. The rest of the deck is here. And I think this deck's really powerful. It's efficient. It's so low to the ground, and it's got stuff to do with its mana if the game goes late in its lands. Mayhem Devil is just a huge beating, and this deck goes through so many cards in its deck thanks to the blood tokens, Anvil, and Synthesizer. That yeah, I would expect this deck to be pretty good in Explorer, especially given that you have to change absolutely nothing. So that's Rakdos Sacrifice. Another black-red based deck that isn't missing a whole lot is this Greasefang combo deck. So Greasefang Okiba Boss is a 3-mana 4/3 that says at the beginning of combat on your turn, you can return a vehicle from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste, and then you can pick it up at the beginning of your next end step. Well, if you have Parhelion, this 8-mana, really big vehicle sitting in your graveyard, you can return it to the battlefield on upkeep, or on beginning of combat, with Greasefang. Greasefang's a 4/3, so it can crew Parhelion, and then it can attack, make 2 4/4 white angel creature tokens that are flying, and vigilance that are also attacking, and then the angels stick around, so even though you have to pick up Parhelion, you still get those 2 angels to stick around and kill your opponent. This deck is very powerful, pretty consistent, and tough to deal with. It also makes use of Voldaren Epicure and Bloodtithe Harvester to make blood tokens, because blood tokens are nice, easy discard outlets. It's got Stitcher's Supplier to mill the Parhelion directly, and it's also got Deadly Dispute as just a way to play the value game if the game goes long. Can't Stay Away is a nice piece of tech that can bring a Greasefang that's in your graveyard back, and then Fable of the Mirror Breaker does everything. It adds treasure, it lets you discard cards, and then it makes copies of things. This deck is tough to beat because it can just play a regular game with some of its creatures, or it can just combo kill you on turn 3. It's also missing nothing between Pioneer and Explorer, so I would expect to see a decent amount of Greasefang combo decks. I like the Mardu version the best probably, but expect to see a lot of Greasefang, and your deck needs to be able to deal with a turn 3 Greasefang reanimating Parhelion as Explorer goes live. So we're going to move on from a couple decks that were missing basically nothing to a deck that's missing a lot of pieces. Blue-Red Phoenix. Blue-Red Phoenix has been a very powerful card in Pioneer since the format started, and it's generally relied on Thing in the Ice to be a secondary threat alongside the Arc-Light Phoenix. And I know versions of this Phoenix deck have started cutting Thing in the Ice, but I think they're cutting it because they can rely on some other powerful spells that we don't have access to in Pioneer yet. Spells like Pieces of the Puzzle, Temporal Trespass, and Treasure Cruise can help keep this Phoenix deck churning and help kill out of nowhere in Temporal Trespass. And we don't really have good placeholders for cards like that. You can play Stormwing Entity as an additional threat if you need it. We have the Dragon Egg from the Smoldering Egg also as an additional threat that's kind of like Thing in the Ice. And then Alrund's Epiphany is a powerful card that takes an extra turn, but it's not quite the same as Temporal Trespass when you can use your graveyard to delve away cards and cast it for really cheap. I'm not sure if you can make a Phoenix deck work currently in Explorer given all of those missing pieces, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe a Phoenix plus Stormwing Entity deck would be enough. Maybe that's just fine. You're also missing one of the 1-mana red burn spells. I think you could probably just swap in Flame Blast Bolt and be okay, or play more copies of Play with Fire. I don't think that's a huge miss. I think that Pieces of the Puzzle is the really, really big miss, and I don't know that there's a good thing to replace it with in the format right now. So until then, this deck might not have the tools to hang with everything else. But you could try it. You could try Stormwing Entity plus Phoenix and see if that's strong enough. I am probably gonna stay off Phoenix for a while, but you've got options if you want to try to make it work. Mono Black Aggro isn't missing a whole lot. This deck still has Thoughtseize and Fatal Push. It's got Dread Wanderer and Knight of the Ebon Legion, Scrounger, Graveyard Trespasser, Murderous Rider, and Rankle, and a bunch of the lands. What it is missing is Bloodsoaked Champion, but you can replace those with Gutter Bones kind of for free, and you won't lose that many percentage points since other decks are also missing things. I think that's a fine swap. You're also missing Mutavault. This deck usually plays 4 Mutavault. So you've got a couple options. You can either just play more copies of Hive of the Eye Tyrant and play some utility lands that the deck doesn't normally play, like If Near Dead lands, or you could kind of swap completely and play Faceless Haven, Snowlands, and then you get access to Draugr Necromancer out of the sideboard. Faceless Haven's a really powerful card. If you've got the Snowlands to support it, you could do something like that. I'm going to talk about why Draugr Necromancer is something I'm thinking about right now, because this deck is missing Kalitas, Trader of Get out of the sideboard. Kalitas exiles creatures when they die, which can be good against other mono black decks or other decks like Phoenix. Kill a Phoenix, it gets exiled, it goes away forever. Draugr Necromancer has that part of the ability. If a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, exile that card with an ice counter on it instead. And then you can cast spells with ice counters on them if you want to. I don't know that you'd want to go down this road, but there are cards in the format that give you that exile effect. They don't give you the lifelink and the zombies effect, obviously. And Kalitas is an amazing card that these mono black decks just don't have access to. There's not a great replacement, but there are 4-drops that you can play for the time being and not feel too bad about. Necromancer, Faceless Haven is an option if you want to go down this road. You could also play a card like Erebos. You could play something like Eradicator Valkyrie for the lifelink. Again, I don't know what the best thing to do here is, but you've got some options, and other than that, the deck's not missing anything. The core of the deck is still intact, and I think you could play a version of Mono Black and be pretty happy with it. Mono Green Ramp has been showing up and doing well in some events recently, and versions of this deck have been around since the format started as well. Usually though, this deck relies on Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx, to generate a bunch of mana really quick. We don't have Nykthos yet, but I think that you could replace some cards. You'd lose about a turn, probably, of speed, but maybe that's not that big of a deal. You're also missing Oath of Nissa and Elvish Mystic, but I think that if you just swap the Oath of Nissa for more lands and play a card like Arboreal Grazer, that might make up for it. And then the rest of the deck is still here. You've got your Ramp, you've got Karn, you've got Nissa, Cap of Thorns, and Storm the Festival. You might want to play some utility lands if you're just going up on raw lands. You might want to splash blue and play Growth Spiral, since you're missing the Oath of Nissa. Growth Spiral draws you a card, goes through your deck more, and it gives you access to other blue cards that I'm not thinking of right now, but it's an option. Sideboard doesn't have to change. All of the sideboard cards from the lists I saw online are still here. So you just need to figure out what you want to do about not having mostly Oath of Nissa to go through your deck and try to find a creature or a planeswalker. Maybe the answer is Growth Spiral and more blue cards. Maybe you just don't care and you just play Arboreal Grazer. If you don't want to play Grazer, you can play Goose in this slot. Kind of accomplishes the same thing. I think I would start with something like this and see if it works. I think that the core of the deck is still very strong. You lose a little bit of speed, but maybe that doesn't matter. So the last deck I want to talk about is the Lotus Field combo deck that uses cards to untap Lotus Field to generate a bunch of mana and combo off and win the game. Basically, none of the cards that you need to actually do the combo part exist in the format right now. So this powerful combo deck that a lot of the decks I just talked about have to dedicate sideboard slots to deal with, this deck just doesn't exist. There is no Lotus Field combo deck. So instead, I'm going to highlight a different control-y combo deck that I think is powerful and you should probably pay attention to, because I think a lot of people have a lot of these cards from when Fires of Invention was a terror in Standard. So this is a Fires of Invention control deck that uses Fires of Invention to generate value and to combo kill your opponent more or less. If you play Fable of the Mirror Breaker and then you transmogrify it, the only creature in this deck is Agent of Treachery, so you get to start stealing your opponent's stuff. You can make copies of your Agents of Treachery with Fable of the Mirror Breaker to steal more of their stuff, and then otherwise you're just a big control deck. This deck's powerful. This deck has a lot going for it, and I would not be surprised to see a deck like this that abuses Agent of Treachery do well early on in the format, especially since the other combo decks don't exist. And look at this deck. You can play this entire deck on Arena. You don't need to make any swaps really. So watch out for Fires of Invention decks. You don't need to worry about Lotus Field decks, so that's great. And since you don't need to worry about Lotus Field decks, I would tune a lot of the sideboards. A lot of sideboards play cards like Damping Sphere or Roiling Vortex or things like that to stop the Lotus Field combo deck from just killing you. You might not need cards like that in the format early on. You might want to skew against Winota or against blue-white control. I think those would be the two decks I would want to skew my sideboard against personally early on in the format. But yeah, that's it. I'm done. Those are 10 decks and where I would start if you wanted to take your Pioneer experience and mimic it on Arena. I think I'm excited to play more of the blue-white control deck. That deck was really strong and powerful. I'm going to try to make mono red work probably. And I don't know what else. Winota maybe. Some of these black-red decks look pretty good. I'm excited to explore the format. I think Explore, like I said, is exciting to me personally because I have a lot of these cards on Arena already, and I want to play something kind of like Pioneer, and I don't really want to buy into Magic Online right now. So this is going to be fun. I'm excited to start exploring the format when it comes out next week, and I hope others are too. But like I said, that's going to be it from me. I hope you've enjoyed. If there are other decks that you think would be good in Explorer, let me know what they are. But yeah, these were my 10 top Pioneer decks and how to make them playable in Explorer. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will catch you next time.